The French movie star, the Russian president, and a deal to avoid paying the highest tax in the world. Gerard Depardieu is given a Russian passport by Vladimir Putin. The actor is making a stand against a proposed new supertax on the rich in France. There are concerns that more could follow. Hello there, I'm Shuli Ghosh, you're with Inside Story. The top court in France says it's unconstitutional, but the French president is determined to tax the country's super rich. François Hollande is proposing a 75% tax rate on the top earners, provoking a storm of protest led by actor and Gallic icon Gerard Depardieu.
It's all right. We made a deal. If I leave quickly, then...
It's time to go, Mr. Ferret.
And he has gone. The star of the movie Green Card has moved to Belgium, complaining that the French government was penalising his success, creativity and talent. And Belgium isn't the only country welcoming him in. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has given Depardieu a passport, making him a Russian citizen. Well, not surprisingly, the actor has been pilloried in the French media and by government officials. But the fact remains that if Hollande gets his way, anyone earning over €1 million could face big tax hikes. Well, the supertax was one of Hollande's campaign promises, and it remains his goal as he tries to cut France's huge public deficit. The national debt in France has gone from 64% of its GDP to more than 90% in 5 years. That's a deficit of around $2.3 billion. Now, the supertax would have only applied to about 1,500 people in France. After the court ruling, the proposal will now have to be reframed and could affect many more. The government insists 9 out of 10 earners will not see any income tax increase, but taxes are threatening to drive more people out of France. Currently, there are thought to be around 1,000 tax exiles living abroad. Requests to leave, though, are already up by as much as 500%. Well, let's introduce today's guests. From London, Nabila Ramdani, a French journalist and commentator. In Paris, Sebastien Ramage, International Officer for the National Union of School Students. And joining us from Geneva is Jean-Pierre Diserens, the General Secretary of the Convention of Independent Financial Advisors. Good to have you all with us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nabila, let's start with you. How has this whole controversy gone down with the French public, the ordinary people, the non-millionaires?
Well, especially the Depardieu's decision to leave France, purely, it has to be said, for tax purposes, because by becoming a Russian citizen, he will only, his flat tax rate will only be 13%. So he's made it himself abundantly clear that his decision was motivated by the high tax rate in France. And it has gone down pretty unwell in France, it has to be said, with people seeing him as being unpatriotic and a feeling that, there is a national betrayal involved in his departure. Even the Prime Minister of France has gone as far as criticizing his decision as pathetic and saying it was not patriotic for Depardieu to leave the country.
But the fact is, he has paid tax, hasn't he? I mean, he's not trying to get out of paying taxes. He says he's paid €145 million in taxes since he began work at the age of 14. And he also says that last year he paid taxes amounting to 85% of his income. I mean, that's a pretty big tax rate by anyone's reckoning.
Very much so, and he's moved to effectively get away from this tax on the super rich. Only came last year, it has to be said, when he decided to buy a house in Belgium to begin with, literally 2 minutes away from the French border, to save money on his earnings. And I think you're right, it has to be highlighted that Depardieu is very much of a self-made man. He's an iconic figure in France. He's the personification of the bon vivant, and it has to be noted that he's a successful actor, so he's made a lot of money from his acting, mainly abroad with movies like Green Card, for example. But he's also a successful entrepreneur. He's a restaurateur. He owns vineyards in the south of France, and he creates jobs and he creates wealth as well, and that's what people tend to overlook too much, in my opinion.
We have had a lot of reaction on this on the social media. I mean, it seems to have raised a lot of hackles. Arne List says, honestly, Depardieu is a traitor. That was quickly followed up by Bill Percayaster, who disagreed. He said, how does it make Depardieu a traitor? If he looked for a lower tax rate, greed, OK. He's greedy like any other economic migrant, but how is he a traitor? Sebastien, let me come to you as representing the National Union of School Students. What do you think, traitor or simply just looking for a better deal?
Well, I'm not going to answer directly to that question, but first thing about Depardieu is that he's not actually in the situation to complain about his taxes. The people who have to complain about their taxes in France are the 60 million people who are going to see VAT increase of 1 or 2% in the beginning of next year. That's a real subject, and that's something where people should have to complain about. But we, as students, are not saying that we're going to leave the country.
You don't think he has the right to complain about a 75% tax rate?
That concerns 1,600 people, like you said before. We're not concerned about this. We are all seeing our taxes increasing, and that's a real subject. But it's normal that people who have more money have to contribute more to society, since it's society that let them become as rich as they are today.
But this is what Depardieu is saying, and others like him. They're saying that this is a penalty, a punishment for people who work hard and have success. It's a punishment for creativity and talent. I mean, what are your graduates hoping to do, if not to make a good living?
First, I disagree with the fact that Mr. Depardieu is a self-made man. He's not a self-made man. He's someone who gained a lot of money because the people went to see his movies, and he had public subsidies to finance his movies. And we're also in France, the country in Europe where actors are actually the most well paid. He can make up to $2 million just for one movie. So you have to consider the fact that it's not a punishment. Actually, society has given him a lot of money, and we just ask him in this time of crisis to finance education, to finance public services that are having troubles to finance themselves. We're asking him to contribute a little bit more. I don't think it's a punishment or a terrible thing to ask.
Jean-Pierre, what do you think? Because this was one of Hollande's campaign platforms, wasn't it? Make the wealthy pay more, and it was in fact supported, or is in fact supported by something like 2 out of 3 people in France.
Yes. Well, we have to be careful when we talk, make the rich pay. First of all, the term rich does not mean too much. And we have to respect the rule of law, which is equal for rich and poor. Now, what Depardieu is doing is obviously he feels that he wants to move somewhere else, and he wants to move out of France, which is his perfect right. I mean, there's no law that forbids anybody, and that's a basic human right, is to go establish yourself where you are the most comfortable, be it in Belgium or be it in Russia. And it is true that, France is a little special because when we look at the tax rates applicable there, the government knew that certain people would react negatively to being taxed 75 or 85%, and eventually go somewhere where they're treated with more respect. Basically, the question is, who owns the capacity and the added value that one individual is capable of producing? Be it being an artist, be it an industrial producer, be it, whatever added value you're being able to create. Now, if you say whatever added value a citizen is able to create belongs to the government, and the government will decide how much money it leaves you out of your own creativity and productivity, then I can understand the reaction of the French government.
So you're saying that it psychologically it has a negative impact on the image of France's economy, and that could in turn have a knock-on effect with more and more people leaving France, and in the long term that's going to have a bad effect on France's economy.
Yes, exactly. I fully agree with that statement. What we have to see is that in a liberal economy, you encourage people to be creative, to create jobs, to create added value by giving them a large share of what they create. And the government itself will take, a contribution, but the contribution will not be a confiscation. And I think in the French example right now, we have reached a level where it's not contributing, but it's being confiscated.
OK, let's just take a look at how France's top rates of income tax compares with other income taxes throughout Europe. Sweden's government takes 56.6% of earnings above $320,000. There's a similar figure in Denmark, but the rate kicks in far lower at $74,000. Wealthy Spaniards have to hand over 52% of earnings above $390,000. Belgium's top rate is capped at 50%, but it does start at an income of just $47,000. Britain's top rate of 50% kicks in for earnings of more than $243,000, although that is going to drop to 45% in April. And contrast all that with Russia, where Gerard Depardieu has been offered citizenship. It has a flat rate of 13% across the board. Nabila, Francois Hollande isn't going to let this go, is he? He said that he's just going to rework the whole 75% tax bracket proposal and resubmit it.
Very much so, and it has to be said that François Hollande had set the tone while campaigning for presidency when he made abundantly clear that he, in his own words, despises the rich, and he was effectively going to tax them heavily if he won the elections, and that's exactly what he's pursuing at the moment. And
so, so the government,
well.
is the French government seen as anti-rich? Is that the problem? And is that having a knock-on effect on, is that making investors nervous? Is that making the wealthy top tier nervous?
Well, very much so, and I think, and I'm certainly not here to defend the rich, but this type of small-time socialism is only going to lead the brightest and the best to leave the country, and some of them are hitting the headlines, like Gerard Depardieu, or allegations recently about Jean-Michel Jarre, the musician, moving to London. Some very successful businessmen like Bernard Arnault.
Yeah, Bernard Arnault, he's the chief executive of LVMH, and he actually said that he thought France's policies were unfriendly to business.
Very much so, and in a small town just across the Belgian border, a third of the 2,000 strong population is actually French successful businessmen, literally 2 minutes away from the northern city of Roubaix. So what this unfair policy, as it is perceived by people who often start from scratch, it has to be noted, is perceived as a punishment for people who create businesses, who have creativity, who come up with ideas and are adventurous in their entrepreneurship, if I may put it that way. And I think the headlines so far have focused on personalities like Gerard Depardieu, but more crucially, this is going to hit extremely hard small businesses, people who start with their own money and become very successful. And that's, unfortunately, is going to put France in a very bad situation economically. Some commentators that argue that it might become the poor man of Europe. I would argue that it might lead to France becoming the poor man of the world, with huge powerhouses like India and China,
I can see Sebastien shaking his head there. It's a gloomy picture, isn't it, Sebastien? You don't agree with that? There's a lot of young people, students, entrepreneurs who want to set up businesses, and they don't want to hand over all their money to the French government.
Oh, okay. First, we have to stop with this idea that all the money is going to the French government. You still can become rich, very
well,
rich
hang
in
on a
France,
minute, because
and,
France has
there still
introduced
are
other
a lot
tax
of rich
hikes.
people in France.
Hollande has added new charges on capital gains,
Sorry?
a wealth tax, increased inheritance taxes, an exit tax for entrepreneurs wanting to sell their companies, and a 45% tax bracket for anyone earning over €150,000. So quite a lot of money is going to the French government.
Yes, but that still leaves a lot of money for these people. And the other person was saying earlier that the added value that people create are not going in their pockets and are going to the government. That's not true. In companies, added value is actually, for the 10 past years, has been going to one person in the company, which is the businessman that actually owns the company. But the employees, the workers that actually produce the added value, have seen their salaries decrease for the 10 past years. And that's also a problem that François Hollande has to face, is that today the people who are losing money are not the rich. The people who are losing money are the 80% of the population who only have their strength and their work to win some money. They don't have capital. They don't earn. They don't have holdings and shares. They only have what they produce. And these people are seeing their situation deteriorate. And there's once again, I have to remind you that VAT is going to get higher in the beginning of next year of 1%, and that's a problem that we have to face. So the real debate is how to increase taxes that concern the most precarious part of the population, and how can we share wealth when there is actually a lot of wealth to share. I must remind you that we're the 6th power in the world, and we do have a lot of companies and people to tax and to share money with. And during Sarkozy's mandate, his 10 years have been the only thing his politics have been doing is decrease tax for rich people. Did we see a good effect on the French economy? No, we didn't see a good effect on the French economy. It actually went really bad. So we've been lowering taxes for 10 years. We see that it doesn't work. We see that it has a negative effect on our public services. Education investments have stopped for the last 10 past years. So if we see that this politic doesn't work, maybe we can change and, well, be the only ones in Europe that try to maybe share money and not take example on Russia. I don't think it's a very good example to base our politics on.
And it is the case that Hollande is in a position where he has to bring down the public deficit. So this is a popular measure pushing through a tax hike for the very wealthiest. It's seen as the patriotic thing to do, isn't it? If you have more, to give more.
Yes, of course, it's a patriotic thing to do. But I just have a question for Mr. Hollande: is what is he going to do with this money? Because he's going to tax people to pay back bankers and to pay back people to whom we owe money to. There's also a problem that we have to see with the functioning of the European debt, let's say. Where does it come from?
Well, let's bring in our financial expert on this.
I don't think...
Jean-Pierre, what do you think? What should Hollande be doing with that money? I mean, for a start, this tax hike on the very richest, as Sebastien has pointed out, doesn't affect that many people. So how can he bring the public deficit down?
Well, the public deficit is a structural problem in France, and we all know that the politicians like to talk about everything except what they should do. And France, I mean, when you look at French GDP, which is 58% of French GDP is created by the government, then you will realize that there's a huge imbalance and that the government share of GDP has to be reduced at least to something below 50% to 40%, so that the economy can again function normally. Now, it is true that what we have observed over the last 15, 20 years is that the middle class has suffered negative income. Now, I mean, basically, the middle class has not benefited from the economic development, except if you look at the European Union, except for the civil servants. Now, what we see is that there's a difference, an imbalance between what civil servants right now are being paid and what the productive industry is paying. And there we have to recreate the balance, and especially in France. Now, the problem of France is that employment conditions are very difficult. It's very, once you employ people, it's very difficult to readjust as an entrepreneur to the needs of the company once you have given employment contracts to your people. And one of the first thing, and that's a taboo in France, I mean, no politician can address that problem, is because they would immediately lose, is how can you make the French marketplace in itself, work marketplace, more flexible? That, I think, is the major issue. And then there's the tax
let me just, I can see Sebastien again is shaking his head. What's your response to that comment, Sebastien?
Well, first, this person here is saying he's clearly, he says he's an economist, which he actually is, he should announce himself as a liberal. He's just asking us to basically lose our labor code rights and to become flexible, us as workers, just to satisfy the labor market. I have a problem with that. You were talking earlier about what do we as students expect to become once we go on the labor market? Well, if you're telling me that we have to lose all our rights, why would I want to stay in France and invest in France? I actually want to stay in France because I know I have a good health system, a good educational system, and a good labor code that protects me. I know that my employer can't just fire me because he needs to adjust to his needs and because he's going through difficult times. I think there are basic rights that have to be respected in society, and that's not the way we're going to reduce the debt crisis.
Okay.
So as I was saying earlier, just can I finish with this? There are other options to reduce our debt crisis. Most of our debt is actually interest rates on debt. And that comes from the fact that our government borrows from private banks. Maybe we can change the European institutions. That way we can borrow directly to the European Central Bank. I think that's a real subject.
Let me bring Nabila in here. I mean, there's obviously a huge debate going on in France right now about the direction of the country, about the government policies, about how France deals with its public deficit. I mean, are people in the country really worried about their future, about their rights, about their education, about their unemployment rates?
Well, I think what Hollande and his government have tried to do is hit the headlines, and it's always going to be seen as a popular measure to tax the rich and indeed the super rich heavily. That's always going to go down well with the general public and indeed ordinary French citizens who are struggling at the moment because of the poor economic environment in the country at the moment. And indeed France has structural economic problems that the president needs to address. But it has to be said as well that his strategy, the strategy of the president, is unlikely to work, because even before his measure to tax the super rich has even had a chance to be implemented, people who do have money are investing their money elsewhere. There was a mood of general panic, and indeed super rich people have already made provisions to invest their money in the luxury market in France, but also abroad. In the UK, for example, London, the property market in London has been dominated by French people. And I think the major problem that France has to address is to absolutely get rid of that stigma that earning money is a bad thing. It's actually good to encourage entrepreneurship and creativity, but it has to be said that the tax rate has to be seen as being sensible and not over the top.
Okay, we're going to have to leave there because we've come to the end of the programme, but let me thank all my guests today: Nabila Ramdani, Sebastien Ramage and Jean-Pierre Diserens. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Before we go, let me just give you some reaction from Twitter on the subject of Depardieu and French taxes. Iman K in Los Angeles says, let's see how judgmental you would be if your government threatens to raise your taxes to 75%. Criminals. Clara Lorenzo Q thinks you have to help your country when it needs you. Now that's it from us for now. If you want to get in touch with your comments, or even if you have suggestions on what we should be covering, you can tweet me direct at HackHound or email the programme on insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.